Hey everyone, just a quick heads up before we get started. This episode was recorded remotely, so the audio quality is a little patchier than usual, but we hope that you'll find the conversation more than makes up for it. Today I'm joined by Matt Pitman, author of the Connection Curriculum, for a thoughtful chat about the purpose of school and the power of connection between us, our students, and the wider school community. I've been looking forward to sharing this one with you for a while now, and so I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Hello, and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra, and today I'm joined by teacher, leader, author, speaker, and one of the most influential leaders of 2024, Matt Pitman. So, hi, Matt. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you. No, I, it's a awkward but impressive intro, I suppose.
I would love to know how one becomes crowned the most influential educator of 2024.
Me too. No, it's just nominations, and I'm just very fortunate to have some really great colleagues and friends and people in the profession were impressed with what I'm doing. I guess I don't know. It was very much out of my hands. But it was awesome and cool and very, very nice to be awarded it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Congratulations.
thank you.
Well, as usual, we usually kick off the show with a glow or a grow. And I always like to ask our guests whether they have a highlight or a growth moment that they've recently experienced. So I was wondering if, before we get stuck into things, if you have something to share with us about that.
Yeah, so I think I'll go grow, and I've been reflecting a lot on the last couple of years of my career, and I think so. This is a big grow, but I've had a lot of experience working with a little bit more effectively, I would say, working with parents and with families. And I think, you know, students and staff, sometimes they can hold on to, some of the truths behind what's going on for them and maybe what their experience is in the classroom or with your leadership. But um, really working with parents has been my growth area, and coming to terms with when their feedback isn't brilliant and isn't what you want to hear, and it doesn't tick those boxes and make you feel like really great. Like sometimes it's critical and it is honest, and it's, I guess, a balance of accepting that and turning it into something that then is really positive, and also continuing to build that relationship with the group that are not in the school and but have such a significant part to play in the teaching and learning process. And so being able to sit down with parents really regularly and make that a part of my practice, that's been my growth area, and it continues to be now. Um, but yeah, like I think parents come in and they come in with care and concern sometimes. And I think we have this mindset still that might be just like impressed on us as teachers, where we're on two sides of like the ring and we're ready to fight and and combat. And so
Mm,
just trying to switch that off and go, no, we're on the same team here. And I think we always talk about being on the same team, but there's still that flight or fight kind of response when somebody goes, well, I'm not super happy that this happened. And it's going, well, let's work on that together then, because this isn't about you or me really. It's about this young person. So I'm trying to work on that. That's my growth.
yeah. That's so real. And as someone who holds way more responsibility in a school than I do, I'm sure you have to do those kinds of conversations so much more often than me. But yeah, talking to parents is one of, I think, still probably the hardest parts of my job. And my one of my first interactions with a parent was very, you know, I guess, defensive. And I'll put my hand up and say that I really probably handled it all the wrong way, but it has totally, yeah, shaped the way that I get really stressed about, talking to parents now. And I'm only sort of just starting to learn that most of them are happy to collaborate and most of them are happy to work together, but I always go into it feeling like I have to defend myself. So yeah, that being on the other side of the ring thing was just, yeah, exactly how I feel most of the time.
And it doesn't change. Like, I think you have your challenging conversations and your difficult conversations, with everyone. Like, it just happens in
Mm,
life and it happens in teaching. And those every now and then you will have a conversation that doesn't go great, but it doesn't mean that they'll all be that way. And
mm,
yeah, I think there are difficult people, like, to be honest, and there are difficult conversations, and like that's just being human. And I think, yeah, I would perhaps come in concerned too if I'd heard only one side of the story, and that
mm.
triggered an emotional response in me, and then I was like, I've got to come in and defend, my kid, and I've got to go
Yeah.
up against this adult who's I've heard is doing these things, and so you're kind of put on each side of the ring by default. And so it's just about, well, how can we change the shape of the ring to something that's a little bit more cushiony and nice and
Yeah.
and balanced. But no, I think it's just reframe it to, this is coming from a place of care. That's how I
Mm,
like to think of it. Like, yes, I might be hearing words and tone that are making me feel something that I don't want to feel, maybe, but that's just that's how they're expressing their concern at this point, and it's not personal. Can be personal, but I will start with it's not, and then we'll see where we can get to together.
very good advice. And we're only at the beginning. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing much more about your experiences and other wisdom that you have to share with us. But first, it's time for tea. We are in real time recording this episode reasonably early in the morning. So I am enjoying a cup of New York breakfast, which Grace, my usual co host, gifted me last Christmas. And I must say, that I'm really enjoying it, and I'm drinking it black, which is probably not my usual default. But it's not as bitter as normal black tea,
Mm.
which is why I'm really enjoying it actually that way. Um, yes. Do you have a go-to tea? Are you a tea drinker, Matt?
I do drink tea, not as often as I used to. I think it was a big thing at the start of my career, and even through uni, and but now not so much. Then it shifted to coffee. I never drank coffee until I started teaching, um, which I don't know. Maybe that was just the way it went, but it was probably not. It was probably strongly related to being exhausted and trying to find anything to get you through those first couple of years. Um,
Yeah,
but no, if I do drink tea, it's usually black. I'm not very picky. I don't mind if it's bitter. Um, yeah, kind of just if it's there and I feel like it, I just go for it.
very nice. Well, I would love to start off the episode really by asking you to share a little bit about your teaching experiences. Um, I guess one of the big, I guess, topics of conversation at the moment is teacher retention and how do we even get people to come into teaching in the first place. And so I'd love to know what drew you to teaching and what has made you stay up until this point.
Yeah, no, it's I think you're exactly right. It's becoming almost, instead of why are you a teacher, the question's becoming why are you still a teacher, which is a real shame. Um, in secondary school, I had all kinds of ideas of what I wanted to do, and they were all very exciting and random. Um, and then I had a teacher in year 11 who, I guess, walking into his classroom, it made it just made a difference. Like the environment wasn't, we're going to, sit in uncomfortable furniture and be told information that we'll have to regurgitate at some stage. It made it real, made it engaging. It was a classroom that I wanted to go be. And on those days when it was on my timetable, I was excited. So just gradually over that, I think it was year 11, that year 11 year, it just became more and more, maybe I could be a teacher. Maybe I
Mm.
could, if I'm only getting 1 out of 6 in my timetable, where this class is the one I want to go to. And I had a pretty good time at school, but there's this one class where I really want to be at. What if I could create a situation where it was 2 or 3 or 4 for a
Mm.
kid down the line, a student? So that was kind of where I ended up. I went on a gap year. I didn't go straight to university, and I went and worked in a boarding school in England uh,
Cool.
to kind of test the waters, I suppose, and see if I could manage kids, for hours on end, and whether I've always thought of myself as pretty patient, and I've been told that, but there's patient as an 18-year-old around other 18-year-olds, and then there's patient when you're surrounded by 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
So I tested that. I came out reasonably unscathed, and then thought, no, this is what I want to do. Like
Mm.
this feels like it's something that would have an impact, and not just, on the community and on the kids. It would just have an impact on me, and I think it would make me a better person. And so that's what I pursued, and I was lucky to attend a university that had a good mix of the academic and then the community side, and a really great kind of environment to work in and learn in, which actually helped me because I did enjoy school, but I struggled in the senior years just with anxiety
Mm.
and examinations and things. But then I guess after having that teacher in year 11, then having some really great lecturers at uni, I found my place and where I like to learn. And so that helped me then be able to understand, well, how do you switch learning to teaching? And so it all just kind of fell into place a little bit, like it was, it was supposed to happen. um, and then I found a job in a Catholic school in Melbourne's West, and um, managed to step into leadership in the first couple of years of my career, which is, something that's not as common now, but it was at the time.
Mm.
That was, again, it was just something that there was an opportunity and I took it, and it was really valuable. And that gave me that curriculum leadership experience really early on. Then I wanted to switch over to probably the more student facing sides, and went through the normal process of applying and getting some jobs. And since then, I've worked in the Catholic system, I've worked in the independent system, I've worked in the government schools as well. And so just trying to cultivate this wide experience of what teaching is across different
Mm.
environments. And now I'm back in a growing Catholic community, trying to bring it all together. And having worked in some government schools and then also in an alternative school as well, looking at the differences between the two, what works, what doesn't work, to try and create something that works for more. And I think that's what teaching is at the moment. Like, it's not, I don't think that we're at the point where we can make it work for all. If I'm being really honest, I'd love it to be, and I think we can get there. But the first goal is to make it work for most, because at the moment, students are, when we look at, staff retention is a big issue, but student refusal is an even bigger issue. And if the kids aren't attending, and that's, it's their education, then why? What's the purpose of the building? And so I think that's kind of my mindset at the moment. So after these 14 years of different experiences, what I know why I'm coming into school every day, but how can I understand why they may or may not come into school? And then what impact can I have on that perspective to make that a different reality? Because, I think there's a changing perspective around how many years you need to be at school and what the end game is at the end. And I think that's a really positive conversation that's happening. But some kids are not even engaged in that process on the smallest level. So my career, I guess, has led to this point. It kind of feels like, where how do we create safe places for learning and not just nice schools for education?
I'm so intrigued by what you said about, how do we make school work for most? Um, because that was really the same question that sparked my interest in going into teaching as well.
Mm,
Um, so I was someone who really enjoyed school. School really worked for me. Um, but I'm also the oldest of 5 kids, and I noticed that, out of the 5 in my family, I was kind of the only one that school worked for. And so I'm like, "Okay, that's 20%, in just our little family unit," and I wonder how representative that is of, the broader population. Is school only working for 20% of Aussie kids? And, very small sample size. I know it's actually probably not that. But that was what made me start thinking, like, what is it that, is meaning that school is only working for school as we know it seems to work for such a small handful of people, and yet we're saying that we think it's important for everyone. Um,
yeah,
and so, it's such an interesting question, and it seems so hard to get schools and, I guess, states and governments and countries, um, even on board with the idea that maybe something about the way that we do school might need to change. Um, but I'm really interested to know what you think might be some of the changes required to make school work for most.
yeah. I think it's the first thing that I see as being a potential barrier is the blame game. I think there's a lot of blame passed on to young people to start with. I think I like working with teenagers. I don't see a lot of positive media about teenagers in general. Like, especially at the moment, there's the social media stuff. The school holidays always brings forth. There's articles about teenagers are out and about doing things and riling up the community just because they exist and whatever it might be. Um, so I think there's a really there's a real perspective issue around young people and how willing they are to try. Like, they want to learn. Like, I really believe that, but they want to learn with purpose. We're into the point now where, as much as I dislike when people say, well, you can just Google it, but there are some things that you can just Google
Yep.
and you can just search up. And quite often I will. I'll on my computer, my phone, and I'll go, I actually want to answer this question right now. Like, my curiosity is piqued. I can't hold on to this. Gone are the days where you sit in a group of people and go, "No, we can figure this out." Go, no, give me a second and I'll tell you. And that's the way things are. But if you can find information, then as a younger person, I'd probably be looking, going, well, I don't want to sit in a room for 6 hours a day and just be fed information. If I felt like I thought I wanted to find that out, I'd go and find that out. I have the tools, most likely have the tools to be able to make that happen. So I guess the classroom environment has to be more than just, here's some information. It needs to be like, why is this information important to me and why should I learn it? And that sounds like a very teenage sentence to say, like, why should I learn it?
Yeah.
But that perspective is one that's missing. And so I think in making schools work for more, I think we need to ask the young people more. I don't think that, before anyone listening, starts that natural kind of snowball into, panic. It's not like getting the kids on their Kara board and they're making decisions about the curriculum. It's our job as the teacher to look at that when we're planning and go, well, where's the relevance here? Like, yeah, we can't pick everything that we're going to deliver in the classroom. We're not at that point yet. We may never be at that point. I'm not sure. But we can, instead of coming up with activities that just use memory, or what can you remember about what I just said? It's like, well, what did I just say? And why do you think that's important? Like, start planning activities that go in that direction. Add a little bit of meaning to the learning.
Mm.
Tell them what the point is. And avoid something that I've done in the past many times is just go, well, look, I know this is not the topic you want to do. We have to do it. We'll try and make it as, as engaging as possible. I'm in the same boat as you, like, avoid that. That's not adding meaning. That's switching them off immediately,
Mm.
because now they're like, well, even he doesn't think that we should be learning this.
Yeah.
So add meaning to the learning. And if you want school to work for most, talk to the parents. Like, I don't think it needs to be along the lines of, what I was saying earlier, but talk to the parents. What's their big concern? How was school for them? We could have an extra couple of minutes on your parent teacher student conference interview, whatever it might be called, to just have a bit more free time to chat. Because I think in that 3 minutes, you can find out a lot more than me just sitting and going, well, the result on this assessment was this, and here's what we can do to work on that. I think create a bit more of a partnership around that student and create something that is a bit more supportive. And you can only do that by having some kind of relationship with the family. And again, these are small things, like add a bit of time to the meeting that you're already having with them. It's not, I know it. One of the things that I always worry about when I'm talking about this kind of thing is that it sounds like it's a big job. But if you're having this conversation already, just change how you're having the conversation, change the questions. In the classroom, it's a great way to find out, what the concern is for that young person is, instead of, asking them why aren't they working, ask them, what about this topic isn't working for you? Or what, like, change it from being I'm asking you a question about why you're not meeting expectations to perhaps, like, what about this lesson isn't meeting your expectation?
Hmm.
You came here and thought in your mind, whether they thought it subconsciously or consciously, what were you expecting? Did you know we were doing this topic? If not, would it help if I was better at telling you what we were doing?
Mm.
Is the unit outline not clear, or do you not have access to it? Like, were you surprised and now you feel like you're a bit defensive? Like, now I'm teaching this because I know that it is important to student A because of this, student B because of this, C, D, E, F, it's that group likes this, so let's try and frame it around this. I don't think that it's adding too much to our existing planning, because it will become automatic as you get to know your students from the start of the year or the start of the class or the course or whatever it might be. Just spend a bit of time, instead of getting to know them in case you need to have a chat with them to manage when they're not having a great day or whatever it might be, which I think is where relationships have started to drift. They've become part of the toolkit for management bring it back towards, no, like this is going to help us learn together. And when you get asked a question like, why are we doing this? Go, well, why do you think? And when they say, I don't know, because they will, you just go, well, let me tell you why I think, and then we'll go from there. And have the intro to your unit be a discussion about why the next little bit might be important. And it might be 20 minutes. And you might go home and go, oof, that 20 minutes like feels like it's going to be costly in this unit. We're wall to wall here. But you'll get that 20 minutes back in the moments when hopefully there's less questions about why are we doing this later on. Because you can go, no, remember we talked about it. This is why we're doing it. And that might not align perfectly, but there's a reason behind it.
Do you feel like, because I think it's always hard for teachers to, uh, I guess, when we're going, okay, we feel maybe restricted or confined by the curriculum or the
Yep.
syllabus, and we might not have a particular interest in a particular section of a thing. I mean, you'd hope, like you said, that teachers are curious, that they're passionate about their subject areas, whatever, whatever, whatever. Um, but there's all things we come across where, yeah, our default response might be, yeah, I don't know why we're doing this either,
Yeah.
but here we are doing it. Um, do you have any ideas or strategies or things you've referred to over your time and experiences to help you find meaning in things so that you can bring it back to the kids more purposefully? Because I feel like one of the often default reasons when we're trying to give purpose to our kids is like, oh, well, this is going to help you for your assessment task,
Yeah.
or this is going to help you for your exam. And personally, I mean, as much as I'm guilty of saying that from time to time,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of kids that don't find that a good enough reason.
No, I agree. And I think more and more accepting that that's a valid response. Like if all you're doing is working up to being assessed on it, then
Mm.
yeah, I think that is worthy of being frustrated and going, well, I don't really want to do this assessment. So then if the purpose is just to do the assessment I don't want to do.
Yeah. If they're not the kind of person who's really driven by, marks and grades and things like that, then, purely just doing well on an assessment um, is not going to give them the
No.
motivation that we're
Well,
hoping it will.
something I've been thinking about a lot actually is like when students are driven by those results, why? And I think that's something that might be worth more teachers asking as well. Why are they driven by it? What's that intrinsic motivation? Like there's a great feeling from getting a good result. And I think that no matter how disengaged you are with school, I think getting
Yeah.
praise and being told that you've done something well is like that hits the right notes. I think it makes you feel good. But if everyone has that inside and they have that button that can be pressed, it's just about finding out, well, what is it for you? When a student doesn't want to work towards an assessment, it's because it might be the type of assessment. It might just be because they've got some anxiety about it. It might be because, again, they've had an experience where they've done a similar topic and it hasn't worked out. If you can get that data, just having that conversation builds a little bit more connection between you and that student. And then even if it's unsaid, it creates this understanding. And I think it's the same understanding that we're trying to achieve when we go, I'm not sure, why we're doing this topic either, but it is something we have to do. You're trying to empathize with their situation and you're trying to create that, leverage that relationship and that bond you have with that group and go, teachers are on the student side and trying to reinforce that. Like, I'm not teaching you this unit because I'm against you. I'm with you. I'm for you. We have to do it. So let's try and soften the edges a little bit. I think you can do a similar thing with a real conversation around, well, how would you assess it? A realistic conversation I've had with a student before is, well, at some stage we have to have this assessment, because if you don't answer questions when I ask them, or if you don't complete the tasks that we do, like, I need evidence. I think sometimes that is not obvious to the students, that we're collecting evidence.
Yeah.
And so I've framed a similar kind of conversation like this around detective work. And this again was a 20-minute aside that a very small part of me was going, what are you doing? Don't do this. Is they've conned you into going on a tangent, like they're
Yeah.
winning. And so switching that off and going, no, I think like this is either this is going to be really valuable, or it's going to be something I've tried and it didn't work. So, I mean, it's not as big of a challenge as that little voice is telling me it's going to be. But I framed it around detective work, and I said, like, if we're trying to solve this case of, have you learned things in this unit? You know, what would a detective do for a crime? And they'd have to collect as much evidence as possible. And if the evidence isn't there, can they prove what's happened? You know, and made it into something that was like 100% a little bit more interesting than that particular unit, by
Yeah.
framing it around, you know, this is a real job. Made it a little bit probably more Hollywood than I needed to, but it's a real job. Like, detectives exist, and they have to find the clues, and they have to look at, well, what evidence do I have so that I can tell the story around this crime? And that's what a unit of work is. It's the story of how you worked through the unit. And so it's in the same thing. I'm trying to, at the end, go, where did you start? Where did you finish? And the only way I can do that is with evidence. So what evidence could we collect then? Because in collecting that evidence, and if the student has those short-term goals and they're like, all right, my evidence for today, even for a really disengaged kid, you know, my evidence for the next 2 weeks is this. They're doing a little bit more work. You're getting the evidence you need, and you're building a strong connection as you go. And at the end, when they probably have to do the assessment, they'll probably do better on it because they've actually been working through some of the tasks.
Mm.
And so it's just, I would advise anyone listening to never talk about the assessment if you can. Never frame that as the reason for why you're doing something today. Unless it's the assessment day, then that's not the purpose of being in the class today. Because if it is, well, it doesn't sound very exciting to me.
Yeah.
And it's going to switch off students' brains and motivation and things like super quickly, I would imagine. So it's find the purpose for why you're doing what you're doing today.
Mm.
And the unit might be, there are tons of units of work across all the disciplines that don't need to be in there anymore. I think we know that.
Yeah.
But they're still in there, and they're in there for a reason that's, you know, higher than certainly my pay grade. So it is a have. We have to do this, but you don't have to frame that for the kids in that. Make it real for them. Make it something that is going to work for them, because they don't care that Vicar or Cara or whoever it is have said they have to learn something. They want to know from you, why are you in the room? Why are you teaching them this? Like, why are you in this experience together?
Mm.
I think lots of people could talk and deliver information. You could get a lot of experts in from their fields, and they could talk about what they do, and that would help a lot of kids. But our job is different. I think our job is like not just to deliver content; it's to deliver content with purpose.
Mm. I guess you're the person in the room that they know and that they trust, and like you say, you could bring anyone in to talk to them about a particular thing. And I think we see that when, you have guest speaker events or, incursions and things like that. And it can be more of a challenge to keep them listening or, settled they're well, they seem, less likely to contribute. If you might be sitting in an auditorium with a couple hundred kids and a speaker says, does anyone have any questions? And there's just nothing
Yeah.
and
What a terrifying situation, by the
yes,
way.
totally.
Like,
But and exacerbated by the fact that they don't know this random person.
yeah,
And why should they, you know, trust them to answer a question? I guess, yeah, I'm just thinking about what you're saying about, yeah, building connection and how that really probably plays a much more integral role in how we're actually framing the purpose of what we're teaching because they could go to Google and find out lots of information. They could go to an expert and find out lots of information, but there's no rapport or anything there that's maybe gonna um, help that to feel more meaningful. Um, yeah, so I think it's always nice to be, I guess, refreshed of that, especially when you get stuck into the year and the busyness of everything sort of takes over and you just get a bit tunnel visiony.
yeah,
um, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I'm ticking this off. Um, personally, I really like um when I'm programming to put a lot of thought into that because that's the time when I feel like I have the mental space to stop and really think about how do I make this interesting or purposeful and shake it up enough so that I'm not just, you know, doing the same thing day in, day out. Um, but if you're going off a program that's kind of just existed for a while and it just says, read textbook pages 120 to 129, I just die a little bit inside. And and I think they're the moments where I have a bit of a panic because I might be just expecting it to be, sort of already thought out a little bit. And if I'm going off a program that I haven't written, it lacks um, that detail, but I might be looking at this, the night before, and I haven't really got time to think about how to make it much more purposeful than that. But yeah, I guess the longer that you're in your role and the more that the curriculum stuff just kind of rolls off your tongue, then that maybe leaves your planning space a little bit more open for making things a bit more purposeful. You're not just trying to get your head around the content,
yeah,
can make it more valuable.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's that very early on in your career. I think there is a sense of survival.
Mm.
Like it's overwhelming. I remember the feeling. I don't remember much else, but I remember the feeling of, you know, I can remember one thing. So one of my teaching methods is PE,
Hmm.
and working in big schools, the PE storeroom becomes a bit of a battleground sometimes, like a friendly battleground. But when you're teaching similar things, and as a graduate teacher, you've spent however much time on your lesson plan stressing about it, like, and then you get into the storeroom and somebody's taken the equipment you want. And
Yeah.
I imagine this is very similar for tech and design, and materials are finite.
Yes.
It's those are the moments that I think are the most valuable. Like they don't lead to your best lessons, but they lead to a huge amount of growth as a teacher. You can't run away from this class and just be like, sorry, team, like I'm out. Whizbees are gone. Like I can't do this. It's so it's just you go into problem solving mode, and I think that's why I think like finding more purpose and meaning in our lessons is really doable because teachers are problem solvers.
Mm.
But until you make the problem really clear, like it just falls into the bucket of things that we're trying to solve daily.
Mhm.
And so I hope that's kind of where this conversation is going for some listeners, is it's pulling that out of the bucket a little bit, because that moment, I remember the feeling of just going, what do I do for an hour? And you always find it, and that's okay.
Mm,
But it's then you go and you explain to the students why you're doing what you're doing, or why it doesn't look like what they anticipated it to look like, or find out from them. I think student voice is way more than, your SRC council or your kids that great kids, but they have so much metal on their uniform from all the badges they've accrued,
mm,
like, because they're just constantly the go-to for those formal leadership positions. Like, voice is more than that. Voice is on the ground. How are you feeling today? And how can I help you take a few steps on the journey?
mm,
And if we're not having those conversations because we're so concerned with content, then I think shift your perspective a little bit, create time for the conversation. It will help the content.
mm. So, it seems to me that building connection is really important to you, um, and happens to be part of the title of your book. Do you want to share a little bit about like that project and that journey? And I guess as we wrap up, like why you think out of all the experiences you've had, the time you've been a teacher, positions you've had, why you feel like this connecting is so integral, um, yeah, to student learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's all I'm talking about at the moment, and I'm trying. And I think like the great thing about connection is that you can talk about it from so many different angles, so it doesn't become the same message over and over again. But I guess the book is, so I'm doing my doctorate at the moment, and connections obviously a big part of that, and that helps you write a book. Like, if
Mm,
you've already got all this stuff that you've been putting together, that, like, finding a different avenue to put that to use, they kind of help each other,
yeah.
because it's very, very easy when, I mean, just like what we were saying with the students, like when you've got this big task that you need to do, you kind of, even as an adult, and it's something I'm very interested in, but I go through ebbs and flows of being motivated to do it.
Mm,
Other
yeah.
stuff is more interesting sometimes than sitting down and reading a whole heap of journals. Um, so I'm doing that work. Um, I focused on student wellbeing and pastoral care and evidence-based teaching in some masters that I completed prior to this. And so the book was kind of a culmination of a lot of different study and experiences at school, where the common thread was people.
Mm,
And then it was, I don't know whether it's super cynical, but I just kind of was looking around and thinking, I think schools are becoming, or have become, about numbers and not the people. But if this common thread is the people, whether they're young people or adults or whatever it might be, then we need to return that focus, and we need to get back to that. Because when you look at some of the connection data, or data relating to relationships, belonging, or meaning in learning, or meaning in life, which are all components of how I look at connection, and the framework the book kind of works through. When you look at those three landmarks of this connection journey, they're all umbrellas for a lot of the individual problems that we're facing in schools, like staff retention, like staff attrition, like, even just, I saw some data the other day in which it was survey data that had taken, um, what's your, in the next 5 years, what's your intent to leave?
mm,
And I thought, what a absurd question to ask. Like not just like leave school, but leave the profession, leave your job. And you're already, and then the respondents were already thinking about it. And I think if we could build stronger relationships between the adults, then perhaps we wouldn't be asking that question. If schools were more than just a workplace and they had a little bit more belonging attached to them. And
Mm,
again, there's meaning for me as an adult coming into this space.
mm,
Then perhaps I wouldn't be thinking in the next couple of years I might leave and do a completely different job. Like to
yeah,
move schools, yeah. Moving school can give you a ton of different experiences. But to leave teaching, that might be your passion. That was just an absurd set of data that is really reflective of this time we're in. So yeah, connection was this common thread, and it just happened that I just felt motivated to write about it, and I enjoy the writing process, and this allowed me to make it a little less academic,
yeah,
I suppose, and make it a little bit more, you know, for the educators and the leaders. And I think it's, connection and or disconnection is one of the biggest kind of issues in the shadow. And refusal, all the from both sides, parents being disengaged and not knowing what's going on in schools anymore, especially since like the lockdowns and things. All
yeah,
of these things just require reconnection. And if we could do that, then there'll be better relationships. That'll be not be for the purposes of management. They'll be for the purposes of being together. If there's belonging, then some of our behavior concerns might dissipate because that's an environment that's safe and supportive for that young person now, so they don't feel like they have to put the armor on.
mm.
Uh, so it's a real area of passion. It's something I talk about a lot because I do think in the next 5 years it'll be the issue.
Curious to know whether you, what was the intention behind, I guess, the word connection as opposed to relationship? Like, I feel like at uni, the big thing is you've got to build relationships. And like that particular word is just used all the time. It's not so much rapport or clout or like anything else. It's always relationship, relationship, relationship. Um, and you've obviously explained that relationship is part of your connection framework, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious to know why connection over relationship, and do you feel like it encompasses a bit more than just your the young people in your class?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's connection, it encompasses way more. And I think relationships have been hijacked a little bit.
Mm,
Um, and they've been made to be, the be all and end all. But in the book, I map out this journey of connection, and it starts with relationships. Like getting to know a young person or a colleague is a great way to start connecting with them. But I mean, think about people you've had a really great relationship with in whatever frame that might be that you don't have anymore. And I would think that that's when you think about that, like it's very easy when a relationship's going well to go, I'm connected to this person. But if you think about on the other end where, well, you can't figure out why the relationship isn't where it is anymore, it's because you weren't connected to them. You just had a great relationship. It's the first kind of step. It's the foundation to then create a space that builds a sense of belonging, because connection is not just you and I, it's you and I and them and them and them. Like schools are communities. And
mm,
so we need to be connected to a community. We can't have a relationship with a community, but we need to feel a part of that bigger whole. And that's what I think is missing from some of the work we do in schools. And so connection encompasses those three things: relationships, belonging, and meaning. But yeah, it's so much bigger than just a relationship. And it's something that was a survival skill when, hundreds, thousands, whatever amount of years ago, when we had to stick together to survive. That wasn't relationship. It was connection to that whole. And it's still in there somewhere. And we just need to bring it back out and make it a part of how we learn. Because schools are a community hub, or there could be. Like every parent I've met is, a really good representation of their kids, like, because they're having that huge impact on it. And if that's the community member that's outside the gate, then we have a mini community of those people inside. So the more we know about them, the more we know about the community outside, the more we can open the gates and make school, again, something that has purpose, something that's real, rather than just something we do for 13 years, because it's happening to kids at the moment. And connection will shift that. That's my belief. If we can get to know the humans and make it about them rather than about content or work, then that shifts that. And that's what the book's called, the connection curriculum, because curriculum is a map. It's a list of things that are super important that we need to get through. It's your outline for what needs to be learned. Well, the first thing we need to do is learn about the people.
Very, very helpful. I'm certainly feeling inspired to work on, connecting better with my classes this year. And I hope that people who are listening are feeling inspired too. So thank you so much, Matt, for your time. And just, all your thoughts and ideas. I really appreciate you sharing with us today.
No, thanks for having me on. Being able to come on and record the conversation and then have it play out to, as many different people as possible. There's so much value. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
If you have enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you give Matt a follow at Matt Luke Pitman on Instagram. And if you are interested in having a look at his book, The Connection Curriculum, I will pop the link for where you can order that in the show notes below in today's episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.